Here's a rough one. I postponed my suicide to see you. I've watched your video on suicide, and hurting my abusive family motivates me further to kill myself. Why should I live? Well, the first question you might ask is, why do you postpone your suicide to come and see me? I mean, I'm serious about this. It's a serious answer to a serious question. You did that because you thought, obviously, and I'm not making any claims of any sort, that this was of sufficient utility to justify your miserable existence one day further. Well, so, if there's one thing like that, maybe there's more, and maybe you need to discover them, and maybe you can discover them. And so I would say, I had this old professor, he worked at the University of Alberta, and he worked with criminals at the maximum security ward. And he was a strange guy. And he took me out there a couple of times, which was a very weird experience. And he said something to me about suicide once that I thought was really helpful. He said, you can always put it off till tomorrow. And that's actually a very helpful thought if you're feeling suicidal and desperate, because the time collapses in on you and you think, oh, this is absolutely hopeless. I can't stand one more moment. It's like, no, that's probably not true. You probably can stand one more moment. You can probably stand one more hour. You can probably stand one more day. And at some point, you get to the point when you're desperate and you're depressed where maybe that's what you're doing is you're enduring. That's what you've got. You're enduring, and you think, God, it's just, and depression can be unbelievably awful. I'll give you a quick example of that. My daughter, because it's very difficult to understand if you've never experienced it. My daughter had polyarticular arthritis, and it affected 40 of her joints. And just having one arthritic joint is no joke. It makes people's lives quite miserable. And 40, that's a lot. And it was degenerative. And so when she was a teenager, she had to have her hip replaced and her ankle replaced, and she was walking around for 2 years basically on 2 broken legs while we were waiting for the surgery procedures to sort themselves out. And she was on extremely high doses of opiates to control the pain, and Ritalin to keep her awake to the degree that she could be kept awake. And she was also extremely depressed. It was an autoimmune condition. And a lot of depression, and this is good to know for the person who's feeling suicidal, is there actually might be something wrong with you. Like you might be ill in a way that would be worth investigating for about 4 years, because maybe you can figure out what's wrong. Now you did say that as well that you have an abusive family, which is also not helping. But I asked her at one point, because I was curious. I've suffered from depression, and it's no bloody picnic, I can tell you that. I said, okay, kid, here's your choice. You can have your arthritis. You can get rid of your arthritis, or you can get rid of your depression. Which one would you get rid of? And she said, like instantly, I'd get rid of the depression. And so, that's something to think about, man. And then another thing she told me, we were talking about the feeling of this depression, and she said, well, it's kind of like you wake up and you have this dog, and you really love this dog, and it died, and it just died, and that's what it's like all the time. And so I thought that was pretty good, because she got the grieving part of it right, that sort of sense of continual overwhelming grief that's part and parcel, but not the whole hell of depression. And then 2 years ago, she had this dog named Seiko, who was a pretty good dog, as far as dogs go, and she really loved that dog. And he died. And she said, this is nowhere near as bad as having depression. And so look, whoever you are out there in the audience, I feel for you and your proclivity for self-destruction. You might be in one hell of a dark place. And there are dark places, and there are certainly places that are so dark that they make death look preferable. If you think that being afraid of death is the ultimate fear, all that means is that there are things that you have not yet encountered, because death is not the thing to be ultimately afraid of. And so I can imagine that you're in a desperate place, but I would say a variety of things. First of all, you got to ask yourself if you've done everything you can to get out of it. You know, like, have you tried an array of antidepressants? Have you tried them at different doses? You might say, well, I don't trust them, or I want to do this on my own. It's like, no, wrong. You have a high probability of mortality. You don't mess with it. If you're dead, you're not going to get better. If you took an SSRI at the right dose, that's an antidepressant, try it for a month. You should know in a week if it makes you tired. That's a good sign. You should know in a month if it makes you feel somewhat better. Give it a shot. If it doesn't work, try another one. If that doesn't work, try another one. If that doesn't work, try another one. Try it for a bloody year and see if it, because you know, you'll still be around in a year. You got a year to experiment with, and if they don't work, quit taking them. Go talk to someone. Find someone. At least, and if you can't afford it, you can't find someone, at least try the damn medication. And then there's other treatments as well that can be effective. And then, and as I said, you should also consider the possibility that there's actually something physically wrong with you. And so don't give up too soon, because you give up and that's the end of it.
Here we need an update. What happened with Jordan Peterson? It happens that I think close to the time of this conference in Wellington, Jordan Peterson followed a treatment once more for depression, because Jordan Peterson has a chronic depression situation or syndrome. I don't know exactly what the kind of disease Jordan Peterson has. I think it's immunological. He has a autoimmune disease, and one of the consequences is a chronic depression. As he said on the interview about that guy who asked him about suicide and depression, probably depression, because he never said that it was depression. He said that he wanted to kill himself to punish his family. So, before wending in the second part of the interview, of the answer, in fact, you must know that Jordan Peterson followed his own rules and almost died. He became seriously dependent on benzodiazepines, and he has brain damage, and he went to Russia in January, I think, to detox.
But then there's something else you said here, which I would also point out here, which is also important. Hurting my abusive family motivates me further to kill myself. Well, that's a rough one, man. Like, I don't know how old you are, and that's relevant. If that's your motivation, then I would guess that you're suffering from some variant of post-traumatic stress disorder, because you wouldn't be possessed by the idea that you could torture your family by killing yourself unless you had reason for revenge. Now, it's possible that your thoughts have gone to a point that's so dark that you're not seeing things clearly. That's a possibility, and you should really keep that thoroughly in mind, because it is possible. But let's assume that you have had a terribly abusive family. Well, what's at the bottom of that abuse? It's malevolence, right? It's the spirit of malevolence. That's certainly what's animating that kind of abuse. It's the spirit of evil, for lack of a better word. And you don't recover from post-traumatic stress disorder or from abuse until you understand that. And it isn't obvious that you want to let that win. And it wins by taking you out. And it wins worse. It's worse than it winning by taking you out, you see. It wins because it also possesses you. Because whatever it is that's abused you, that spirit of malevolence, now wants to inhabit you so that you can extract your revenge. And so not only will it kill you, it will also take your soul. And I would say that's a very bad idea. So, well, what are the reasons? There's probably more things that you could try. And you know, I've seen people recover from unbelievably serious cases of depression, like immobilized in bed and definitely suicidal on a 24-hour continuum. You can recover. The medications can work. I would say, get the hell away from your family if you can do it. And if you're 16 or 15 or 17 and you can't quite manage it yet, well, then endure for a year or two and leave. And don't look back like Lot's wife. Remember in the story when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, God warned Lot's wife not to look back because she would turn into a pillar of salt. Salt, that's tears. Man, if you leave, don't look back. You brush all that catastrophe off and see if you can set yourself up a life. And if it's justice that you need rather than revenge, and justice is much better than revenge, then what you do to obtain justice for yourself is to go out and have yourself a life, despite the fact that these malevolent forces have conspired to take you down, and to see if you can do it. You know, there's beauty in the world, and there are things to do, and there's a place for you in the world. There's a hole that you leave in the fabric of being by your sudden departure. And the addition of the catastrophe that you produce as a consequence of your suicide, all it does is make things more like hell. And that's not the right answer. And so that's what I would say. You say, well, why not kill yourself? Because it's wrong. It's wrong. You know, and I don't mean wrong in the finger shaking way. I mean that even if you follow the logic that has driven you to the straits that you find yourself in, what you do by taking your fantasies of vengefulness to their final conclusion and making your abusive family miserable, let's say, in a vengeful manner, is you fall prey to the very force that brought you to the brink of catastrophe. And there's no victory in that. And you could instead have the victory. It's not going to be easy. I'm not trying to make light of this, and not everybody who is depressed recovers. You know, you may be in for, sporadic periods of depression through your life, but there are lots of treatments that work, and if you work diligently and carefully and you're willing to pursue every avenue, you have a reasonable chance of finding out what the hell is wrong and fixing it. And then maybe you can have a life. And then you have your life and you don't look back. And then you have your justice. And that's way better. And so you don't commit suicide because it's wrong. You go out and live like you could conceivably live, with some good luck and some goodwill and some willingness to attain help and the grace of God, let's say, all of that, and you prevail, and that would be much better. And so that's what I would recommend for you in the 2 minutes that I have to make such a recommendation. So best of luck to you, and I hope that you can endure. And do remember, people do recover. There may be something out there that could help you. There's 100 things you could try. And maybe you've tried 20 of them already, but certainly getting the hell away from your family sounds like a start. So, Jesus, what have you got to lose, man? You're already willing to contemplate death. Leaving, that's a relatively trivial problem by comparison. So, best of luck to you.